I'm Vinnie Politan. The subject of my investigation, the death of Boston police officer John O'Keefe. Prosecutors say Karen Reed murdered him with her SUV. The lead investigator in the case was terminated because of his conduct during this investigation. And now many are wondering about his role in the retrial of Karen Reed. Here's the story. The case against Karen Reed centers on allegations that she struck her boyfriend, Boston police officer John O'Keefe, with her SUV and left him to die in the snow outside of 34 Fairview Road in Canton on January 29th, 2022. A pivotal figure in the investigation is former Massachusetts State Trooper Michael Proctor, who led the initial inquiry. During the first trial, Proctor admitted to sending derogatory and profane text messages about Reed, referring to her with offensive slurs and expressing a desire for her to harm herself. He also joked about searching her phone for nude photographs. Those revelations led to his suspension and eventual termination from the state police for misconduct, including sharing confidential information and consuming alcohol while on duty. The defense argues that Proctor's bias compromised the integrity of the investigation, suggesting that O'Keefe was killed during a confrontation inside the house and that evidence was manipulated to frame Reed. They point to Proctor's unprofessional conduct and alleged connections to individuals present at the party as indicative of a broader cover-up. As the retrial unfolds, the credibility of the investigation and the role of Trooper Proctor remains central to the defense's argument for reasonable doubt. But now some are wondering whether he will even be called to the witness stand. Now, when you watch a trial, and sometimes if you're in the courtroom, it's even more obvious, but there are certain moments in a case where people are like, you know, it's just a moment where you kind of turn to the person next to you like, oh my goodness, did you just hear that? Right? And we see people online when they're watching these things react to moments like that. Well, in the last trial, that moment was Trooper Michael Proctor on the witness stand reading some of these text messages. Now, this is evidence that normally a defendant would never get. This was evidence from his personal phone that was subpoenaed and uncovered by the federal investigation and then made available to the prosecution and defense. Obviously, the defense, they're the ones who wanted to use it. So I want to remind you of that moment. And this was the moment in the case from the witness stand, listening to these text messages. And you're talking again about a highly trained investigator, a lot of experience, and the lead investigator on this murder case. Take a listen.
These came from me. Funny, I'm going through his client's phone. No nude so far. I hate that man. I truly hate him. I responded, yeah, she's a babe. Weird Fall River accent, though. No ass.
Yeah, she's a babe. Who's the she?
Miss Reed.
We could go on, but there'll just be more beeps for you to hear. But it was a big moment in that first trial. And it brings us to the first question in our investigation. And it's about the text messages. Some were to coworkers, some were to friends. What did Trooper Proctor's text messages reveal? Right? There's a lot of ways to interpret that question. Here to help us through all of this is John DePietro, host and creator of Road Patrol Live. And joining us by phone tonight, Karen Reed supporter Nick Rocco. Great to have you both here.
Thanks, Vinnie.
Let's go back to that first trial, and I'll start with you, John. I mean, that moment was like, oh my goodness. What did that reveal to you when you heard those text messages?
Vinnie, I was actually in the courtroom the first trial, and I mean, you just couldn't believe that someone, I used the word reckless, it was really shocking actually, only because I had known, well, not know him, but I knew of Mike Proctor because I followed the Brian Walsh case, and he was the lead investigator on that. At the time, it was it was just the ultimate bombshell, and the awkwardness of him reading them on the stand. And you could just tell the momentum from the Reed team. It seemed at the time, I remember walking out of the courtroom in Dedham, and it seemed like the trial is over. Like how do you overcome some of the language that he'd used at that time? It was a moment you really don't come across that often in court, only because at the time some of the language is that appalling, and you could see jurors had a visible reaction, visceral reaction that, boy, you left that day feeling like this case is going south very, very, very quickly.
Nick Rocco, what did those text messages from Trooper Proctor reveal to you?
Well, I believe it showed his true colors as to how he thought about Karen Reed early on in this investigation, when he was, texting his friends about a few hours after, basically saying, Brian Albert's not going to catch any heat for this. She's the one that's going down. We're going to pin it on the girl. And then proceeded to talk about, her medical conditions, which he would only have known about those had someone told him about those, because Michael Proctor and Karen Reed did not have a relationship. And we heard on the stand Jennifer McCabe talk about the fact that her and Karen Reed had one thing in common, which was MS. So for Michael Proctor to know about her medical conditions would only tell you that someone told him that stuff. So if Jennifer McCabe seems to be telling everybody everything about this case, you're getting one-sided information, which obviously Michael Proctor believed, hence why he started talking very badly way early in the beginning of this case and pinning it on the girl. And it just shows his complete bias in the case and his unprofessionalism.
So in this retrial, we're hearing the text messages that he's sending to coworkers. What we haven't heard, and I want to play it right now, is Trooper Proctor, some of those text messages Nick was talking about, sending to friends of his. Let's listen.
Who's that from?
A friend who lives in Tennessee.
And what is it that you respond?
My first response was nope. Homeowner is a Boston cop too. I responded with, she waffled him. I responded, she hit him with her car.
Okay, John DePietro, this is something a lot of people are troubled by, right? Because the first time I heard the story myself, I was like, oh, there's a police officer on another police officer's lawn. Okay, this could get ugly. But then there's no investigation of any of the officers. And early on, you have the lead investigator saying, it's not going to be a problem. He's a cop.
Well, Vinny, you mentioned the federal investigation, and the federal investigation found, although it may be offensive, or as some would say, locker room talk, or who knows how sometimes police talk about suspects behind closed doors to each other, but there was nothing, there was nothing that was hinting at, we're going to fix her, we're going to get her, there's a conspiracy. There was nothing like that. As far as her medical condition, I disagree with Nick. I think that basically came out when David Yannetti initially was trying to build sympathy for her, saying she's got these medical conditions, she loved this man. So it certainly didn't come from Jen McCabe. But make no mistake, as much as some of the language was inappropriate, nothing came of it. They didn't find that Proctor had done anything that compromised the investigation. He did do a very thorough investigation. He was one of several investigators, just like on a team. Maybe one team has bad behavior. It doesn't mean everybody drops a pass or fumbles the ball. So I think they go overboard trying to say just because Proctor's texts were inappropriate and used some language that it cost him basically his job. In no way, after this was looked at with the federal investigation, they never found a hint that it led to the conspiracy.
Yeah, but I would come back to your football analogy with a baseball analogy. One guy, like, I don't know, Bill Buckner, could ruin something for an entire team. That's just possible historically. Nick Rocco, John is saying, okay, one bad apple doesn't spoil everything, but the bottom line is Trooper Proctor lost his job because of his conduct in this particular case. It wasn't because of something that he did in another case. Like we've seen, I've covered the trial where someone gets fired for something they did in another case, and it impacts the present trial. But here, he's fired for what he did in this investigation.
Well, he also got fired for, being under the influence of alcohol, driving his work vehicle while on the job. So there were other things as well. But to the point of one bad apple, don't forget, there were other law enforcement officers like Yuri Buchanan and DeChico on those text messages who did nothing about this. So that then makes them a bad apple because they're not stopping the behavior of Michael Proctor, who is, Yuri Buchanan is his boss. He should have nipped out in the butt right there. Once any allegations of him having a connection to the Alberts was talked about, which obviously Michael Proctor didn't mention to anybody, he should have been taken off the case. He knew he had a friendship with them, and he knew he had a relationship with them. Hence why Julie Albert wanted to get him a gift for, the day that Karen Reed was indicted. They wanted to get him a gift, and he said, no, give it to my wife. So to say that he has integrity in this case, that's almost laughable at this point. Yes, he absolutely destroyed the case, and I believe Hank Brennan fears calling Michael Proctor to the stand because he knows that once Michael Proctor gets on the stand and says what he says to the women and to the men in that jury box, it's going to be hard to basically believe anything that he touched. And that's why Alan Jackson today went over with Yuri Buchanan every single affidavit and that he put in. Everything had Michael Proctor's name on it. So for him to sit there and say, oh, he wasn't the lead investigator or he's not a big part of this case, that's a flat-out lie. We know for a fact he lied in a couple affidavits about the time that he seized Karen Reed's vehicle. You don't need to lie about that stuff if you have the truth on your side. The vehicle was towed at 4:17, and he put in his affidavit many times. I think it was either 5:18 or 5:30. Those are not scrivener errors. Those are intentional. There's a reason why he did what he did.
John, do you think prosecutors don't want to put this man on the stand in court? It just seems that way.
Absolutely, Vinny. And today in court, listen, Yuri Buchanan, this is someone that joined the service, joined the military after 9/11. He fits the role. He, did security for vice president. I think right now, Hank Brennan, as he's streamlining this case, I just don't see the need for Michael Proctor. You don't need to put everyone that was touching the case on the stand involved with it. And they did make headway today, and it was a big day. I know why the defense wants Proctor, because he's a huge distraction and everything that Nick just mentioned. But the fact of the matter is, it's not as if he was then arrested because what the federal investigation found. It's not as if they then uncovered that he was planting evidence or anything like that. So locker room talk, yes, cost him his job. But as far as totally compromising the investigation, you still have a defendant who had a broken taillight saying, I hit him, and the evidence there keeps piling up.
All right, John DePietro, Nick Rocco staying with us. Coming up next, what evidence did Trooper Proctor collect?
Whose case is it, or who has that case? Your answer would have been Michael Proctor, correct?
Yes.
Is Karen Reed a killer girlfriend?
She's guilty.
Or the scapegoat in an elaborate cover-up?
Karen Reed was raped!
Karen Reed is accused of murdering her police officer boyfriend.
Defendant stated repeatedly, I hit him.
She may end up taking the stand. Her first trial ended with a hung jury. They haven't proven anything.
Will a jury finally agree on a verdict? We know who did it.
The Karen Reed murder retrial. Live coverage weekday mornings, 8, 7 Central on Court TV.
Do you believe that Michael Proctor, his involvement in this case, taints the investigation? Tainted the investigation?
No.
Not at all.
The investigation was done with honor, integrity, and all the evidence pointed in one direction only.
Honor and integrity by Michael Proctor.
Interesting moment, cross-examination of Sergeant Buchanan. Talking about Trooper Proctor, and there's a lot of talk about him. We heard about him in the opening statement from Alan Jackson. We've heard him throughout these cross-examinations, and a lot of people are wondering whether he's actually going to be called by prosecutors. So what exactly, and it seems the prosecution is downplaying his role in all this, but what exactly was his role? Well, there was another trooper on the stand, Trooper Connor Keefe, who testified about Michael Proctor's role. Take a listen.
Whose case is it, or who has that case? Your answer would have been Michael Proctor, correct?
Yes.
Michael Proctor wrote the report, correct?
Yes, he did.
He was the lead investigator writing the report, correct?
Yes, he wrote this report.
Okay, so he's writing reports, he's the lead investigator, but I have another question, and it's the next question in our investigation. What evidence did Trooper Proctor collect, right? If you have people who are collecting evidence and finding evidence, then you're going to need them to testify. But if he's not collecting evidence, if he's just one of several who was there at the time, then maybe he doesn't have to testify about that. And with all the problems he has, do they want him to testify? Let's bring in our guests who are going to help us answer these questions. Massachusetts attorney, criminal defense attorney Joseph Krowski Jr. You've seen him on our air win trials. You know, a lot of defense attorneys don't win trials. Joseph Krowski Jr. wins trials. Wayne Dennison also with us. You saw him win the Johnny Depp trial. So we've got a couple of winners here. Okay, we got that established. Let me ask you, though, Joseph, Trooper Proctor, he's the lead investigator. Is he collecting the evidence? Is he necessary for the prosecution to get certain pieces of evidence in front of this jury?
No, he's not. You know, ultimately, that's the choice they're going to make. But if you remember, the date of the incident was January 29th. And at the time, it was EMTs and first responders that found the body. So the body had the clothing absent a shoe. The CERT team arrived at that scene at 4:54 or 4:56 p.m. before Michael Proctor had ever been to the location. There was 6 CERT team members that secured the area. They found clear glass and red pieces of glass from the matched up the rear tail light of Karen Reed's car. They also found a sneaker. And if you remember from the testimony, they primarily searched the road area because they knew it was going to be plowed, and the rest of the front yard, especially the area of the flagpole where Karen Reed had indicated she had dropped John off, was frozen. They knew from videos that John O'Keefe was missing a hat. So Yuri, Proctor, and DeChico went back 2 days later, buried about 3 feet into the snow, frozen to the ground hat. Proctor found additional area, found some more pieces of tail light, had called ahead to the state police, and it was collected. So there was pieces of tail light, there was a hat, there was a sneaker, there was pieces of clothing, all found either with Proctor being accompanied by other officers or the CERT team or other officers seizing that evidence. One other additional piece. Remember, Proctor did not enlist himself to become involved in this investigation, nor did anyone from that house make a call and say, hey, get Michael Proctor on this case. It had been predetermined a month earlier that he would be the on-call CPAC officer that night. And as far as the mean texts, yeah, what's the origin and causation? To me, they sound like texts from someone that's really angry at a person because they believe
Joseph, I didn't ask you about the text messages. He's doing a filibuster on us. Look at this.
I just had to listen to you talk about him for a half hour.
I need a gavel. I need a gavel. Okay, let's take a listen, Wayne, to some of Trooper Proctor's testimony about some of the evidence in the last trial.
So after we viewed Mr. O'Keefe's body, we observed a pile of clothes in the corner that hospital staff had cut off Mr. O'Keefe and kind of piled into the corner.
Did you come into possession and seize Mr. O'Keefe's phone?
Yes.
And do you recall where it was that you received or retrieved Mr. O'Keefe's phone from?
We received it at the Canton Police Department.
How many times did you go to the area of 34 Fairview Road over the course of the next days and weeks in regard to potential recovery of items?
So February 3rd, I retrieved items on the 8th. the 11th and 18th, and he was out there on the 10th with Sergeant Mechanic as well.
Okay, Wayne, last trial, all of a sudden he was retrieving evidence, and now tonight he's not retrieving evidence. Do you think it's going to be kind of awkward if he doesn't testify and he's there when evidence is being found?
Yes, I think it is going to be awkward. And he is the lead investigator. And quite frankly, from an evidentiary perspective, you might not technically need him in order to get the evidence in. But you're going to open up a very big question with the jury as to why this guy isn't there. And frankly, I suspect that the Reed team will call him as a witness if the prosecution doesn't. And the prosecution will likely need to call him, try to blunt some of these, some of the very difficult text messages and other evidence that was the bombshell in the last trial, so that it doesn't have the same impact this time. But it's a big question if he does not testify. You've already got other evidence of a pretty shoddy investigation, and now you have the lead investigator immediately jumping to the conclusion that she did it, and quite frankly, sexualize her from the very first moment he's involved.
Okay, Joseph, we only have 10 seconds for you to answer this, but in all the years you've defended accused people there, has the lead investigator ever not testified in one of your trials?
Sure, I'd have to think back, but I think they've got the evidence in they need. Look, he's going to testify one way or the other. Either the Commonwealth or the defense is going to call him. So that issue is moot. He is testifying one way or the other.
All right. Joseph Krowski Jr., Wayne Dennison staying with us. Up next, when did Trooper Proctor have access to Karen Reed's SUV? I'm Vinnie Politan. We continue our investigation of the death of Boston police officer John O'Keefe. Karen Reed is the accused murderer on trial, but the lead investigator in the case has also gotten into major trouble and was terminated because of his conduct during this investigation. Here's the story. On January 29th, 2022, Boston police officer John O'Keefe was found dead in the snow outside a fellow officer's home in Canton, Massachusetts. His girlfriend, Karen Reed, was charged with second-degree murder, accused of striking him with her SUV after a night of drinking. The prosecution presented evidence including broken taillight fragments matching Reed's vehicle, O'Keefe's DNA on her car, and numerous angry calls and voicemails she made to him that night. However, the investigation led by Massachusetts State Police Trooper Michael Proctor has come under intense scrutiny. Proctor admitted to sending derogatory and profane text messages about Reed during the investigation and expressing a wish that she would harm herself. He also joked about searching her phone for nude photographs. These actions led to his suspension and eventual termination from the state police for misconduct. The defense argues that Proctor's bias compromised the integrity of the investigation, suggesting that O'Keefe was killed during a confrontation inside the house and that evidence was manipulated to frame Karen Reed. As the retrial unfolds, the credibility of the investigation and the role of Trooper Proctor remains central to the defense's argument for reasonable doubt. Okay. The murder weapon in this case, the alleged murder weapon, is Karen Reed's SUV, so it's a really important piece of evidence. Of all the physical evidence, it's probably the most important piece of physical evidence in this case. Now, I want you to take a look at this dash cam video. This is, and we've talked about this, this is 8:23 in the morning in the driveway of John O'Keefe's home over on Meadows Boulevard. And as the car pulls up, the dash cam right in front, that is Karen Reed's SUV. And this is probably one of the best images of that SUV that was obtained throughout all of this with all the video in this case. But as you can see, there's snow on there. We're not talking about the state of the car at that moment right now. But what I want to talk about and what this calls into question is because at that point, Karen Reed still had possession of her car. And when she comes back to the house with her brother and her father, the three of them then go back to the parents' home, to Karen Reed's parents' home, and they take the SUV. So the SUV is no longer at John O'Keefe's. So, as I mentioned, big piece of evidence, which brings us to the next question in our investigation, which is about the SUV. When did Trooper Proctor have access to the SUV? Right? Because this is a big part of the defense allegation here, is that Trooper Proctor gets access to it, and that's when he's manipulating the taillight and helping to plant evidence in this case. So when did he have access to that SUV? Here with us, host and creator of Road Patrol Live, John DePietro, who's been inside the courtroom, and on the phone, Karen Reed supporter, who's also been inside the courtroom. They are our insiders. Nick Rocco is with us. So I want to play this testimony. Again, last year, Trooper Proctor on the stand when he was a trooper, talking about the seizure of Karen Reed's SUV.
The fact of the matter is, that was false. The car was not seized at 5:30, was it?
4:16 p.m.
Right. An hour and change, an hour and 18 minutes, hour and 20 minutes earlier. Is that right?
Yes, there was just an incorrect transcription of time.
An incorrect transcription of the time.
Yes.
All right, I want to begin with Nick Rocco this time. Nick, from your perspective, the significance of the timing here and what sort of access does Trooper Proctor have at this point to Karen Reed's SUV?
So, yeah, I just mentioned this, right? You have Michael Proctor in an affidavit, not only once, but twice, putting the wrong time, stating that he seized this vehicle at 5:30. And then when the defense called them out on it, the prosecution then says, well, no, alarm.com doesn't automatically change. So it was daylight savings time. So that really was the time. And then once they proved that the alarm.com actually does change for daylight savings, that's when they ultimately had to admit that, okay, it was a scrivener's error. So he had that vehicle starting at 4:17 when the vehicle got put on the tow truck. Now, the Dayton police officer, Nicholas Barrows, who testified for the prosecution the first time, stated that that taillight was not completely damaged and it was missing a piece. And there's a reason why the Commonwealth is not calling him this time and why he's on the defense witness list this time, because he's the only unbiased police officer in this case that saw that taillight outside of the Canton Police Department and outside of the Massachusetts State Police. So he had that vehicle from 4:17 until it went to the Canton Police Department. And we saw in that Sally video, he was behind that taillight.
We're going to take a look at that video in just a second. I want to start on this video and bring John DePietro into the conversation. John, is this a concern? Is this a problem that the times were initially wrong? Is this a cover-up? Is this a scrivener's error? What exactly is going on here? And should it be a concern, and not just a concern in the trial, but a concern for the truth?
Proctor was definitely there, and Buchanan testified. I mean, Mike Proctor was with him when they went to get the vehicle, and then he even said he wasn't watching him the entire time. But something that I think, Vinnie, the Commonwealth has done really well, Hank Brennan, this time, is they really crystallized what Karen Reed's vehicle looked like as it was then leaving Meadows. I remember, I mean, in the first trial, they did a decent job of it. For some reason, they just seem to be highlighting it more, blowing it up more. It just seems to negate some of the Proctor talk, only because as she's leaving Meadows, I think Hank Brennan, they've done a good job in illustrating where that light was knocked out.
All right, Nick, we're going to put up the video now from the SUV in the Sallyport. And it's not inverted. It's more accurately depicts what's going on. What is, from your perspective, what's the significance here? What is the timing? And what sort of access would Trooper Proctor have at this point?
Well, you actually see Yuri Buchanan take a picture of the front of the vehicle when it was pulled into the Sallyport. But you notice what they didn't take a picture of was the back of the vehicle, because you had multiple people behind her passenger side taillight in the Commonwealth in the first trial, which, again, how can we believe Yuri Buchanan to tell the truth when he in open court told the jury that that inverted video was true and accurate when it completely was not. You see multiple people around her taillight. Now, it may not have been specifically Trooper Proctor who took that piece and threw it at Fairview, but there are undocumented people at Fairview Road that O'Hara does not know who it is. So, and then another thing with his testimony was, in the first trial, he said they didn't start digging until 5:41. Now this trial, they started digging at 5:21. So all the testimony is changing in this case. Unfortunately, the jury doesn't know what happened in the first trial. But at 5:07, when she left John's driveway, it does not look like the same condition that the state police are showing us. And I'm sure the defense, that same picture that you pulled up, Vinny, a few weeks ago, I'm sure the defense is going to show that to the jury, that the day before January 29th, it looks the same at 5:07, aside from a small piece missing from hitting John's car, and it does not look like the same it does when the Massachusetts State Police took custody of it.
John DePietro, are you concerned at all about what's going on in the Sallyport?
You know, Vinny, again, I was in court when the inverted, I mean, that was a big day, and that was a big bombshell. But again, I want to come back to what I think negates the whole thing. And I think you had actually touched on it a little bit earlier. But okay, so if you want to say that some of the taillight was planted there in a split second and somehow a conspiracy was come about. But what I have found in the courtroom was, you know, it was not only the taillight glass that was found, and very sharp, as a matter of fact, but also the straw found, you know, the drinking straw found in the road. And that shoe, Vinny, the reaction of the shoe, I think was bigger than it was last spring. The shoe today, or inside the court, it was almost like akin to finding the glove with OJ. And I just think there's other things there that are found with the taillight that kind of negate the element that if you're going to say they planted the taillight, you'd have to maybe infer that they planted other things. And just because of the grass and the snow, it just starts to, it doesn't seem feasible.
Nick, I want to give you an opportunity to respond to some of the other things that were found there at the scene.
Vinny, it's as simple as this, okay? We know that there was 3.9 inches of snow at 6 in the morning when John O'Keefe was found. In New England, that's not a lot of snow. I mean, you drive very easily in that type of weather with 3.9 inches of snow. So you have Gallagher saying that leaf blower, he used that leaf blower for a reason, to make sure he didn't miss anything. But what they missed was 47 pieces of taillight, a shoe, a hat, and a supposed drinking straw. Now, but they found a clear piece of cocktail glass. And you notice what was underneath the cocktail glass? Snow. You notice what the blood was in? The blood was on top of snow. And we know at 1 in the morning, there was only 0.8 inches of snow. That's absolutely nothing. So that glass would have been most likely on the grass. There would have been no snow under John O'Keefe. I know Kerry Roberts had testified to it, but guess what? There's no pictures of anything at the crime scene. So now you only have one person saying that there was a patch of snow under John O'Keefe, yet we see blood on top of snow, we see a glass on top of snow, and we see taillight on top of snow. So how did that get on top of snow if there was only 0.8 inches of snow on the ground when supposedly Karen Reed struck John O'Keefe with her vehicle?
John DePietro, we have 30 seconds left. I'll give you the last word on that.
Benny, the blizzard, the blizzard really affected the investigation. And Nick's not wrong on the amount of snow, but the heavy snow was coming. And it's tough to ignore where there's grass stains and things are buried. They testified that Yuri Buchanan said that John O'Keefe's hat was found beneath like a foot of snow. The meteorologist was very, very effective in talking about how big the storm was, and also the grass stains on John O'Keefe's clothes, Vinny. This was huge with the plexiglass. It was a big moment in court when they demonstrated his clothes that were found.
All right, John DePietro, Nick Rocco, thank you so much, and I will see you up there next week in person. I'm telling everyone, I need some good weather. Still to come, can the defense win this case without Proctor on the stand?
And he's been disgraced by his own agency, not by us. By the Massachusetts State Police.
It's been my passion to work in nursing homes.
One of our residents passed away.
On the next Interview with a Killer.
You watched and stood by while your patient was lying there being tortured.
What else was I supposed to do?
That's so conniving. You understand that? So much for your career in caretaking.
Interview with a Killer, season finale, Sunday at 8 on Court TV.
He's been disgraced by his own agency, not by us, by the Massachusetts State Police. Investigated, suspended, and fired. Conduct that included bias in favor of his friends, the all-powerful Albert family, and bias against my client, Miss Reed, the outsider. Do you have any idea how hard it is for a state trooper to get fired? Well, the evidence is going to show that Michael Proctor earned it.
It's Alan Jackson in his opening statement talking a lot about Trooper Michael Proctor. And again, here we are sitting here wondering if prosecutors will even call him to the stand. I want you to take a listen to more of Alan Jackson's opening statement because I think it really brings home the significance of this witness for the defense. And we saw it in that first trial. Take a listen.
This case carries a malignancy, one that has spread through the investigation. It spread through the prosecution from the very start, from the jump. A cancer that cannot be cut out, a cancer that cannot be cured. And that cancer has a name. And his name is Michael Proctor. He was the lead investigator on the case officer, the architect of the entire prosecution. You'll learn there's not a single part of this case, folks, not a single part that he didn't touch, that he didn't direct, that he didn't orchestrate personally.
Like I said, a big part, like the foundation of the defense, from my perspective, is built on Trooper Proctor and his actions and what he did and what he said. So significant. And that brings me to the next question in our investigation. Can the defense win this case without Proctor on the stand? What if prosecutors don't call him? What if the defense doesn't call him? Let's bring in our Massachusetts legal experts, Joseph Krowski Jr. and Wayne Dennison. Wayne, I'll begin with you because Joseph Krowski Jr. already ruled that this was moot, but we're going to do it anyway, Joseph. We're going ahead. We're steaming ahead. We're overruling you right now. What if he doesn't take the stand, Wayne? Can the defense win the case?
The defense can win the case, but if he doesn't take the stand, it is problematic for the defense. When you make an opening statement, you're making a promise to the jury of what the evidence is going to be. And there's going to ultimately be an instruction that says lawyers' arguments are not evidence. And if we don't have direct evidence of Michael Proctor's pervasive activity in this case, that's going to be problematic. Can they still win? Yes. This case started, at least from the defense perspective, as a reasonable doubt case. They flat out said this is a reasonable doubt case. And quite frankly, what they're going to point to is a really shoddy investigation where, I mean, literally evidence in this case was collected in solo cups. This is not beer pong. This is a murder investigation.
Yeah, I did though, Wayne. I covered a trial in New Jersey and the evidence was placed into pizza boxes. So there is precedent for this, and I'm not lying. I saw it in the courtroom myself. All right, Joseph, I'm going to go with your presumption that, yes, he is going to be called to the stand by one side or the other. What do you expect his demeanor to be like in this? I mean, this case cost this man his job, his profession, his reputation, everything else. What do you expect in terms of demeanor from Trooper Michael Proctor, former Trooper Michael Proctor, when he takes the stand like you say he's going to?
So now that the issue regarding his employment status has been resolved, I think he's going to fight harder. I think he's going to be more combative. Look, he took ownership of those texts. He probably apologized 8 to 10 times during the cross-examination from Alan Jackson. And to me, I think he's got to be more forceful and tell the jury the origin and the causation of that acrimony he felt towards Karen Reed. It's not someone that he was framing. It's someone that he was mad the way she was behaving after, in his mind, in good faith, believing she had killed a fellow officer. And I know you don't want to talk about it, but that car at 8:20 in the morning, that picture, it can't be just fortuity that it's missing 15% of the rear tail light. And it's important to note that Michael Proctor was still at home when that was captured. So they've got to, if the jury doesn't believe the evidence was planted, then she's in real difficulty regarding charge 2, the OUI manslaughter, because the taillights at the scene in a debris field around John O'Keefe's body. So they need him because right now they have some evidence of mean texts, but they don't have anyone planting any evidence before this jury.
Wayne, do you see what's happening? Just like, he takes over the courtroom when he's trying a case. He comes on the show, does the same exact thing. He's like producing from Massachusetts right now, producing the segment, but we appreciate it and we understand it. How do you think, if the demeanor is that way, Wayne, who does it help? If he comes across more combative, more forceful, especially when being questioned by the defense on all of this, does it help the defense or does it harm the defense? Does it help his credibility or hurt his credibility?
I think he's going to be more polished this time. Whether he comes out more forceful, I think he's probably going to know that if he comes out angry, it's going to hurt the prosecution and help the defense. I don't really care how many times he apologizes for those text messages. Quite frankly, it's impossible to understand how anybody who's in charge of this investigation sends those kind of messages about, even if he deeply believes that she did this, why he's looking for nudes on her phone, why she's talking about her backside, why she's talking about, very intimate aspects of her body. This is ridiculous text messages. And I don't think he's going to ever have a good explanation for that.
Yeah, that seems to be the one part, right? Sure. That's disconnected from what she's alleged to have done, Joseph.
And to be clear, I'm not defending the indefensible. I'm not sanctioning those texts, and I've been pretty clear about that from the start of the case. And look what the damage that they did in trial number 1. Certainly there is issues of nullification. It might be a real turnoff to some people, but remember, if we are to trust the reporting from that juror, still as much as 9 out of 12 jurors believe she was guilty of count 2, and they did not believe the conspiracy. They did not believe that he planted evidence. He's paid a heavy price. I agree with Alan Jackson. It's difficult to get fired from the Massachusetts State Police, and he has for the content of those texts. But it's a bridge too far to suggest you go from that to framing a woman that he had never met before. And again, the relationship with the Alberts, him and Brian Albert had never met before. So that's something that's been laced into this case, and he'll have a chance to rehabilitate himself with that.
Great job as always. I'll see you guys next week. Joseph Krowski Jr., Wayne Dennison up there in Massachusetts. All right. What was uncovered and revealed about the lead investigator, Michael Proctor, during Karen Reed's first trial was an unexpected gift for the defense, and it may have been their best opportunity for an acquittal. That's because prosecutors have had time to readjust their presentation for the retrial. And now the question is, what will Proctor's role be? I'm Vinnie Politan. We'll keep digging for answers as the investigation continues.